Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Joan and we have Sarah here today. I'm honored to introduce her. She's going to be in conversation with her mom, Amy Bloom, who's also a best-selling author and a good friend of the store. Sarah Moon is going to be speaking about her new book, Family Week. Sarah is a teacher and a writer who's come to join us from Brooklyn, New York, although she's originally from Connecticut. And I hear that she has her former teacher here, first and second grade teacher. So exciting.
Yeah, you never get away.
Sarah loves writing books for young people. And in addition to this new book, Family Week, she also has authored 2 books, Middletown and Sparrow, and co-authored a young adult anthology called The Letter Q. Sarah explains that she enjoys writing queer books for young people. Family Week is a story that explores how 4 best friends spend their usual week together at an annual gathering of LGBTQ families in Provincetown, Massachusetts, and have this year feel different because of all they've had going on in their lives. I want to thank Sarah for joining us tonight and for providing books on topics such as identity and acceptance that resonate with so many of our young people. Please give a warm welcome to Sarah and Amy. Who said you wanted to talk first?
I don't think I said I wanted to talk first. I think I said I would talk first. We are both really, really happy to be here. We have been here for such a long time. This was one of Sarah's first jobs. I have been hanging around this bookstore for, 35 years, exactly 35 years, I think. And I thought we could begin tonight just by having Sarah read a little bit from Family Week, so you could get some sense of how it sounds and what the narrative is, and all like that.
I'm gonna read a very little bit, if that's okay. Okay. Family Week was kind of like gay Christmas. That's how Lena explained it to her friends at school. It wasn't just a regular beach vacation. Mom canceled her clients and Ma actually put up an out-of-office message and surgically removed her phone from her hand. And they, along with thousands of other gay families from all over the country, headed out to the smallest, gayest town in the world. Provincetown was an old Portuguese fishing town at the northern end of Cape Cod, as Milo and Lena had been forced to learn during an interminable tour at the Provincetown Museum one ill-fated rainy family week when they were 9. What Provincetown was now was what mattered to them. A town where rainbow flags were as prevalent as telephone wires, where big boned Barbie skated down Commercial Street handing out flyers for her shows, where Ralphie at the West End Salon blared Whitney Houston while dyeing Lena's hair purple the summer she was 8, where the grumpy shopkeeper at the bookstore was never happy to see them, but always let them sit down in the aisle and read, where if you rode your bike into town early enough in the morning, the streets filled with the unbeatable smell of ocean and Portuguese muffins. Where no one ever asked if Ma was their mom, with her short hair and full sleeve tattoos and her worn out Smith college tee that she seemed to live in the second they got within 5 miles of Commercial Street. Even in progressive Portland, Milo and Lena couldn't count the number of times they'd been asked who their real mom was, or if Ma was their mom at all. She didn't look like one after all. I looked real enough when I was 8 months pregnant with twins, my belly practically falling out of my overalls, Ma would mutter. But during Family Week, there were more moms like Ma than Milo and Lena could count. And moms, mas, mamas, daddies, papis, babas, limas, abas, mimas, trans parents, cis parents, non-binary parents, genderqueer parents, and radical fairy parents, and their cis, trans, non-binary, and everything in between kids. For 1 week, there was nothing special about their special family. Milo wasn't the only trans kid. Lena wasn't the only one with some random hair color. There, anyone who looked at them, even at their worst, like right now, stuck on the Bourne Bridge with Lena earbuds in, pretending to be asleep to avoid the blame for the traffic. Milo alternating between glaring at her and glaring out the window. Mom playing an 18th round of Sudoku on her phone. And Ma, face bright red, trying to keep the rage inside this time. Anyone could see they were family. Okay, so I did that.
I want people to hear it. I think we're sharing the water.
Sure.
I think that one of the things for me, seeing the book in a series of stages of development, that's fair.
It's very, you're the only person who reads my work. Yes, it's very fair.
I'm not the only.
No, I
person.
know.
The what I was struck by with this particular book, I loved Sparrow and was enormously moved by it. And I loved Middletown also for lots of the same reasons. And genuinely, not just because she's my daughter, but I'm I think a very particular reader and kind of fussy. And so very fussy, is really the truth. But I think this book began with such joyfulness. And I just wondered if you were mindful of that as you were beginning, you were like, this is, we are going for the joy, we are going for the celebration, or that just sort of came along as the characters came to life.
Oh, I'm so glad that it comes through. I mean, I think that it's probably for me slightly impossible to write about Provincetown without an enormous amount of joy. But also with Sparrow and with Middletown, I felt like my job was like, I'm writing these stories that are sort of like fundamentally kind of a bummer. And I'm gonna make them be happy. Like I'm gonna make sure they have happy endings. I'm gonna make sure there are jokes. They are not gonna be bummers, even if the premise would suggest otherwise. And with this one, it was just like the premise felt like the place to me, and the place for me is all joy. So that part is just a little bit circumstantial. And I don't like to write, nothing wrong with them existing. I'm just not the person to write them. Books that are about gay suffering, and in particular, the gay suffering of children. I think that showing kids that there's a big, bright world available and waiting and happy and excited to meet them feels like a big part of my job. And so there's no place that made me feel like that as a kid more than Provincetown. And so writing a story that's set there sort of imbues it with that feeling. I hope, evidently. Yeah.
I felt that way. It's partially because I like you know, as the Sarah and I and our family started going to Provincetown a really long time ago. And there is something, I think, for both of us about, you know, driving up Route 6, and as the dunes come into view, you know, you sort of exhale. I think, I wondered among your characters, who were it seems to me that it might be, that the parents were a little harder to write.
What do you mean?
I'm just going out on a limb, that the parents were a little harder to write. Sarah and I both tend to write short. And so if I say to her, something seems to be missing, it's probably true that something is missing because my sentences are very short. And I wondered if some of the characters came to you a little harder or a little slower.
Yes, all the grown-ups. I hate writing grown-ups. It's why I write about kids. And this is the first book where I haven't like killed off at least one parent.
So great.
Right?
So great.
In my first book, I killed off a parent. I had written him at first and I was like, you gotta go. And in the second book, I sent the mom to rehab for like 97% of the book. And in this one, the parents are allowed to exist, but they're very hard for me to write. And there's also a lot of parents. And so they were hard. I had a little spreadsheet. So the parents were probably the hardest. Of the kids, I think that probably, I mean, maybe Milo was the hardest for me to write, only because his experience, not as a trans kid or any of his identities, but in fact, because of his giftedness, like a real reach for me. I was like, I guess it would be hard to be really good at math. That sounds like a really difficult road you've got to walk, Milo. And so trying to understand a lot about what would make him tick and the things that would sort of set him off is just very different from me. And the other kids feel less different from me.
Do you feel like everybody, parents and the kids, have some little piece that you find?
Yeah, I'm sure that better writers would say no. Yes, they all
better
like
writers
kind
might lie, but it's still always true.
Yeah, I mean, they all kind of have little bits, and some of them, you know, I don't. know, I don't spend a lot of time trying to identify with the parents only, but I know what it's like to love your kid, and I know what it's like to worry about your kid. And as soon as I can access that, then the rest of them, it's sort of, they come into their different sort of parent shaped molds. But that's usually what's at their center. But the kids, I think they're bits of me. They're also, I've been teaching for 21 years. And so I also, they're bits of my kids too, that and that's not even conscious at this point. It's just like the being around young people all the time. They sort of, I don't know, they watch me while I'm writing and they say or laugh or say like, that was a really bad idea. Try again. And so I feel like they're both my audience, but also sometimes show up in my characters.
Do you have a routine?
Do I have a routine?
I'm trying to be polite.
I do not have a routine. I have a child, but I do not have a routine. I would say, I mean, the closest I ever got to having a routine was in March of 2020, and living in your house, because I had a 2.5-year-old and no daycare. And it was a really busy month, if you guys recall, and I had a book due. And so I would write from like 4 to 8, and you would take the baby. And so that, like, if they woke up during that time, I knew that I would have that time regardless. And so that felt like sort of the closest I ever got, and I didn't keep it up. I still have the tendency to write very early in the morning if I'm under a deadline, and otherwise in fits and starts and bits and pieces, and some Sunday mornings. And the great thing about being a teacher is that I can write in the summer. And like, but that makes it sound so much more normal and productive than it is. Like, it's all in between Real Housewives of wherever, and like rounds of Mario Kart, but it's there. It does happen.
Are you, people say in writing, I mean, I don't say it, you don't say it, but other people say it, like, are you a plotter or a seat of the pantser?
No, I don't. I grew up writing poetry, many thanks to one person in this room, who taught me that it didn't have to rhyme. And so I was like, oh, okay, then I'll try this thing. And I wrote poetry only, until I was in my 20s, and no longer so terrified that you would think any fiction I wrote was horrific, that I was able to start to write fiction. And I still find it very scary and quite long.
That's right.
It's really
Very
so much
long.
longer than poetry.
Well, the
And
big margins in poetry are fantastic.
it's really, yeah. And so I have to write outlines, because otherwise it feels like I'm never gonna survive it. It's just gonna be the longest thing that anyone has ever had to write, ever. And so I outline so that I can know that it will end someday.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, I find it very reassuring. You also told me that I didn't have to write entirely sequentially, which I didn't really understand at first. And so I could like write something and then go back to it later, or skip ahead and write a different scene, but I can only do that if I actually have an outline, because otherwise I just feel like this is a lot longer than a poem and I'm not sure I can do it.
Were there significant changes you made in the plot? Did things happen?
It's mean to ask me about
No, it's
plot.
not.
I have a terrible time with plot. I'm very bad at writing plot. I hate plot.
You're welcome.
And yeah, I blame you. I like would mainly write entire books that were just like the sort of middle grade version of the, like, what's his name? The guy who writes like, then I brushed my teeth and then I looked out the window.
You know, the guy
the Carl,
wrote
blah, blah,
like
blah.
400 pages
Yes.
about changing the baby's diaper.
Yeah, I would do that. Like,
The
that
struggle.
sounds fine.
Yeah.
Plot I find really overwhelming. Again, I find all aspects, I guess is what I'm understanding by the sentences that are coming out of my mouth, of writing really challenging. But plot foremost among them. And so yes, it was largely you and my editor both going, And then what happened? And that's where my editor was like, sharks are a thing. And I was like, yeah.
No,
She's
that
like, no, sharks are a thing. Have you thought about sharks? And I was like, oh, okay, fine, I'll add a shark. The plot's hard. But if I can make things happen in the book, then it also ends quicker. And so that's really nice too. I do find some comfort in it once I can nail it down. But I also had to get out of the habit of creating conflict and then solving it on the next page. And like understanding about myself that it was revealing certain aspects of my own personality that I would create a conflict and be like, and then it was fine. And so having to learn how to both like in myself and on the page, let that sit a little bit so that there could be a plot.
Was there anything when you were writing this that surprised you, that sort of emerged from the garden that you hadn't seen coming?
I changed two of the characters' names like 2 weeks before it was published, and that felt right. But it was surprising that it had taken me so long to get it right. And it was so obvious. Milo's name was Mac and Mac's name was Milo. Milo's the one who's obsessed with the Phantom Toll Booth, who's the main character, which is Milo. So naming him Milo seems like a pretty easy way to go. But it took me quite a while, and that was surprising. I think the thing that was surprising to me in the writing of it was actually how difficult it is. There's a way that in queer families, I'm sure this is true in all families, but there aren't, I guess, in families where people have maybe the same name, that you can say somebody's name with a certain tone or inflection and everybody knows who you mean, right? And making sure that all the parents and all of their names were distinct enough for the reader to be able to understand it, because it is really a thing that you hear and not that you like read, was really challenging. And I didn't think that was going to be challenging because I don't experience it as a challenge in my family, right? When my kid says a word that even before it comes out, right, starts with the letter M, I know whether it's me or my wife. Because of what they're calling me for, or what the tone of voice is, or who they're irritated with. You can tell. And I think that most kids in queer families, you just know, you can tell. And figuring out how to make that make sense on paper was.
Do you see it in your head? The things that people are doing?
Yeah. Do you?
I do.
Oh, great.
I used to be surprised when people sometimes would say, oh, it's very cinematic. And I thought, but that's how you see it.
Right.
Like you hear it, but then you have to see people trotting along doing the things that they're doing. So you can get to the end of the sentence, so you know what they have done.
Right. Yeah, no, they just kind of hang out. They appear and do their things, and I watch them and write it down. It really makes you sound quite batty when you're,
It's true. So there's this line Alice Walker used to have in which she would say, when she is writing, the characters come and sit on the end of her bed and tell her their stories. I have not found to be true in my writing. And so I wondered how you first hear the stories of who they are. Like, is it like you hear their voice, or you see somebody doing something, or it comes from a memory?
I mean, sometimes it comes from a memory. I think they often come from a memory. And this particular book came from two very weird, one from a student that I worked with, who I was really, really nuts about, and who lied all the time.
Oh,
yeah, I know you knew who I was talking about. I love my liar. And I'd always wanted to write about this kid in some way, but I didn't know how I was ever going to write about it. And then as I was thinking about that kid and wanting to write about that kid, I also thought about when I was a kid at camp, there was this kid who would steal all of our name tags. don't know if you remember this, I'm looking at my sister, who was I camped with. But that's all they would steal, would just like steal our name tags. And I thought, that's such a weird thing to do. I want to write about that. And so Avery came first, because I wanted to write about a kid who was stealing something. And she was stealing something. But like something small, and that it wouldn't matter. And from there, everybody else kind of, you know, how they do, cropped up. But that's weirdly, I mean, those two stories have like nothing in common with the tone of this book or the feel of it or like the joyfulness, but that's their root, is like my liar and sort of a passing interest in this kind of weirdo klepty kid when I was in 5th grade.
Were there particular things from Provincetown that you really wanted to make happen in the book, that you wanted to sort of center a piece around?
I wanted to get the feeling, and I hope that I did. I think that, you know, I think a lot about the first time that you took me to Provincetown, because I was 10, which means that it was 1992. And it was the middle of winter, so there was a lot of snow, there was a lot of AIDS. And that setup doesn't necessarily make for like the most joyful, welcoming, exciting experience, and that's exactly what it was. It was the best time I had ever had, and the summer version is even better. And so I wanted to be able to write about, like, I have this memory, this very strong memory of being alone with at Mark's house, with his pretty house with those pretty roses, and his dog. And the dog pooped on the rug. And I was like in this person's house who I didn't know very well, and I was by myself with a dog that's pooping on the rug, and I was still like, this is the best thing that has ever happened to me. I never want to leave. And I have had that feeling about that place forever. And I think that feeling is just the feeling of being seen, and celebrated for exactly who you are, and like sort of taken into the tribe. And so I think that like there are lots of ways that shows up in Provincetown. And that can be through, you know, sitting on the steps at Spiritus, which I definitely wanted to have them sit on the steps at Spiritus a lot, and they do. And you know, that can be through drag shows, and it can be through ice cream. Like it's in all the pieces to me. Or a really cute dog pooping on a rug, which doesn't happen in this book, so I get to save it for the next one.
Well,
One after that, right?
Yeah.
No, exactly. To stow them away like nuts.
Are you inclined to say anything about the next book?
Sure, I like talking about my dibblings. Also, so the next book is also set at Family Week. It is called, tentatively, if they will allow it, Invasion of the Dibblings. Dibblings are donor siblings, so we are not with our same sweet people. I love them, but they're off on their own adventures now. I couldn't really do another round of 4 main characters. I feel like it's just like right at the edge of my talent. And so I've got 2. I'm back in the familiar terrain of I'm writing about 2 sisters. So here we go. And these are 2 sisters who go to Family Week every summer with their parents. They have different donors. And one of them, without telling the other, decides that she's going to use Family Week to find her donor siblings. And the other one has a lot of big feelings about that. And so it is about that. And that's, I mean, in some ways, publishing is very strange. And so that feels much more present than this guy, even though I love this old friend. You know, the last time I read this was like a year and a half ago. The rest of the time I read Invasion of the Dibblings was yesterday. So it feels very fresh in my mind because it's due at the end of the week. But it's been a lot of fun to write that and to get to revisit this place that I have revisited so many times, and also try not to like, I want to recreate the feeling, but I don't want to recreate it in the same way. So maybe it's my last book set in Provincetown. I don't know that I've got more tricks in me, but I think that one of the things that's so special about it is that, like, you know, some of my core Provincetown memories are of places that do not exist. There is no Don't Panic, which was like a gay tchotchke shop in the 90s in Provincetown, and I loved it. And that place does not exist anymore, where you could buy like pride rings the size of your head. And I did. But the feeling is still there. And so finding the ways that the feeling exists now, I feel like that is like an endless supply. But thinking about how, you know, like every family has a different relationship with it, the town, and every family is going to have different sets of traditions. And that's been really fun to get to play with for my favorite place.
I don't know, Darren, you'll have to keep us on track.
Yes, do you want to go to some questions now for the
Yeah.
audience?
Sure.
Sure.
Hi.
Presentation of the booklet.
Mhm.
What? Is it YA or middle?
It's middle grade. It is middle grade. I think I'll be writing middle grade for a bit, because I was writing YA, but they were all 8th graders. And then finally, my editor explained to me, thank God, that you basically need to write about 7th graders or about 10th graders and up. And that there's not a lot of writing about 8th and 9th graders, despite the fact that I will always choose to write about 8th graders. I made these guys into 7th graders. They all started as 8th graders. Now they're all 7th graders. So I think I'll be writing about 7th graders again.
Is that the age you teach?
No, it was though, for a long time. I teach 11th and 12th graders, so I help kids apply to college. And so that's my age group, and I love them. I love my big kids. They're amazing, and interesting and funny and smart. And I miss middle school, like, with every bone in my body. I love middle schoolers. And being able to write about and for middle schoolers just feels like such a treat. The reason I started working at the school that I work at was because I would be able to teach both. When I started, I was teaching 7th, 8th, 10th, and 11th. And I really liked being able to do all of it. Now with the college piece, I'm just with the big kids, but my heart is with middle school. They're the best / worst. They're mine.
Some more questions?
It was interesting to me when you said that you have to kill off parents. I think a shrink would have.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what you mean.
Does that worry you?
It's so.
No, I killed parents in my novels all the time.
As long as you're not killing the kids.
Exactly. No, I mean, I love you, and I think you're great, and you should be in a book. I can't write it. I don't know what it is about writing adults. It's probably honestly that it feels too close to writing adult fiction, which feels too much like somebody else's territory that I don't go in. And so I stay in my corner where everybody is 12. But when they have the audacity to be adult humans who are raising these 12-year-olds, because it's not all Lord of the Flies and they're happy to be adults, it really do struggle. I worry about how to make them sound believable. I really don't like books where parents are villains. And so I don't want to do that, but also there's that problem with plot that everybody keeps bossing me about. And so I feel like with the Dibblings, in fact, I learned a lot about writing parents because it was such a smaller family. The new draft is such a smaller family that I was like, okay, I'm not really going to be able to like get rid of these parents, right? It's a family of 4. And so we're going to have to deal with them. And so I've gotten a little bit more comfortable writing them. I was at an event last week for my school, and I saw my kid is in 2nd grade now, but I saw their preschool teacher who came up to me and said, you used to write like the kid and now you write like the parent. And I don't know if that's, I hope I haven't lost the ability to write like the kid. But I do think that as my kid gets older, I get less freaked out by the idea of, I will never write adult fiction at somebody else's house, but of the idea of writing adults who can like do things more than just as figureheads. I got closer than I ever have been in this guy, and even closer in the next one. So they're
If I can
coming.
add something to that, I think that I can't speak for everybody, but I think that lots of writers, the killing off of a character is not because you don't want them to exist, but because for whatever reason in that particular story, you can't follow their story all the way. So that you want them to have been,
Mhm.
and you want to acknowledge their presence, but it's also hard to sort of figure out. I will say in my first book, I had people dropping dead all the time. And it was pointed out to me, I will say, by my editor going, oh my gosh, sort of saying it just like you did. Have you seen somebody? But it was partially because there were characters who were in unhappy marriages. And I found divorce to be such an excruciating topic that I solved the problem by just having people be hit by buses, you know, so that
Yeah,
nobody
that
had
would
to
be
get
great,
divorced.
actually.
So- Thank you.
Let's see.
It's also helps.
But I think it's you want to bring the character in and acknowledge them and have them present. But it's either too hard or it's not at the center, and so often,
Right.
you know, an early demise is the best way to go.
How do I figuring out how to make these adults full humans without having full arcs, because it's not about them, right? It's about their kids, and I wanted their kids to be at the center. Was it like took a lot of doing. I think that on like draft 3, you were like, so this mom has no distinguishing characteristics at all. It's like, huh, well, she's this kid's mom, and you're like, yes, that's in her name. What do we do beyond that? And it's been very helpful and less scary each time to get to let them sort of take up a little bit more space, or at least have like qualities, personalities.
I like that.
Right,
Oh,
you said your first trip to Provincetown was when you were 10 years old.
Yeah.
Did you have any preconceived notion about this place?
I have absolutely no idea. No. Yeah.
What brought you there?
What brought us
that
there?
would be me.
I feel like we were going for somebody's reading.
That would be me.
Yours. I was at the house with the dog by myself. All makes sense. You were at the Farmers Birth Center? Yeah. And I mean, there are a lot of things that you deserve many flowers for. And the foresight, or just I guess having eyeballs and good sense to look at me at 10 and go like, there's a place you need to go. And she didn't tell me anything. I had no idea where we were going or why we were going there.
Obviously,
until
since she
now.
doesn't remember that there was a reading.
No, like, get in the car, Cynthia, get in the car. You know, or
Did you have an aha experience at 10 years old?
I have looked essentially like this since I was younger than that. And so I feel like the aha experience was more of like oh, there's a word for it. I didn't I understood that I was a very weird kid. Thank you. And yet, adults loved me. But I was a bit of an odd duck. And don't be sorry. I was a little bit of an odd, not a little bit. I was like an odd duck who spent a lot of time watching like Designing Women and Murphy Brown, a lot of time, and reading very weird. I mean, not weird if you're my mother, but what's her name? Sylvia comics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like I had these very bizarre cultural references for a 10-year-old. And then I was surrounded by a group of gay men who really liked my cultural references quite a bit and didn't think I was so odd. And so I really liked the feeling, but I didn't understand the word for the feeling until I was in 7th grade. And my mother, who had the very wise policy, I think inherited from your parents, of like, if you can read it, you can read it, so take it off the shelf. And so I read The Color Purple when I was 12, which is why it's great that there is queer middle grade literature now. And I went, oh, and that was sort of the moment. The moment when I was 10 was honestly more of just like, I'm not alone. And like, there's a big world. And not everyone in it will think that I'm quite as weird as I seem to be presenting to my peers. And that is life-saving.
Well, I think your books are like.
Shush, shush, shush. I mean, thank you. That's very nice. Yes.
Yeah, the second
Well, being
response.
here, was she weird?
You didn't have to tell I was older though. I was
7th grade.
7th grade. I had totally normaled by then.
So you think you're normal now?
Not even a little.
Okay.
But it's very nice to.
I can't stand that word, normal.
It's nice to when you find the people who get the less than normal. That's a very lucky thing.
Is there anything else we can do for you nice people while we're here? Anything else we can tell you? And Sarah's gonna sign books.
Yes, I am.
Right?
Yeah.
And,
There's books for sale this family week, and also Sparrow in Middletown, we have a couple of copies, and she will sign
Yes, I am.
any of those books.
Now, it's just you and your sister.
Of my siblings.
Yes.
So it's me and my sister and my big brother.
And do they write?
My sister is a wonderful writer, and a clinical psychologist by trade. And everybody, can write, and my brother can too. But I think that, yeah, I think that I think he's gonna be really mad that there's another book about sisters. I feel bad. It's like, sorry, dude. This one got a couple brothers.
Yeah, they're
It'll
brothers.
happen. There'll
They're
be more
brothers.
of them.
Yeah, lots of writers.
So being aware of AIDS at age 10, I was like totally in another planet.
Mhm.
I woke up at 20.
Hmm.
But is it because of who you were surrounded by, or?
I think it was both. It was both that like, it was definitely part of like who I was when I was being surrounded by it, but also because it was like in the news. And so I think one of the very weird things for queer kids of that generation who sort of came of age in the 90s is that you grew up thinking like, this is terrifying. Like being gay is so scary, right?
Oh,
And so like that, so I grew up being very aware of it, but being very aware of it in this like very
The disease.
the disease and the news and the like, the sort of both the callousness of like the Reagan and Bush times and then the publicity of it, but not I wasn't aware of it in terms of like activism or community until I was more surrounded by it, until you took me to Provincetown. And then I was like, oh, I see that this is not like, yes, this is scary, but it's not just scary. And it really taught me to like look for the helpers. And that was a really good lesson. But until then, I had been very aware of it in terms of like, you get like the little like scholastic news printout at school in like 3rd and 4th grade and be like, well, this is very frightening. I'm so glad that I am never, ever, ever gonna be gay. And so it's very.
That's interesting because I thought it was about sex.
Yeah.
So I didn't think it was about if
Yeah.
you were gay or not. For me, it was sex.
Yep.
So I waited till I was like 21.
Mhm.
So I was so frightened about
Yeah.
it. I was like, oh no, I have to wait.
Yep.
Because of sex, the
Yeah.
problem. It was
That's-
not, yeah, it was not gays for me.
Yeah.
But then again, at 10, I was clueless. No idea.
Yeah, I think the stuff that did filter through was that because that was the stuff that was also
Mhm.
easy for people to understand, right? And other kids to talk about and be like, to tease each other about and to all of that. So that's what filtered through.
Do you want to ask questions? I want to thank Amy and Sarah.